Disclaimer: this content is only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. You think you know someone. You live with them, share meals, laugh at their silly jokes, argue about laundry, and plan a future together. But what if one moment, just one unexpected confession, suddenly makes you question everything you thought was real in your marriage? That's exactly what happened to me. My name is Nina, I'm 29, and this is the story of how my husband's secret fantasy changed everything between us. It started on an ordinary Wednesday night. We were just relaxing after dinner, both scrolling on our phones, half listening to a movie playing in the background. Nothing dramatic. No signs. And then out of nowhere, Kabir, my husband of 3 years, paused the TV, turned to me with this strange look in his eyes, and said, "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone before?" I laughed at first. I thought he was going to confess to eating the last slice of cake or secretly cancelling dinner plans with my parents. But the way he looked at me, it wasn't joking. It was serious. Nervous. Almost scared. That's when I knew, whatever was coming next, wasn't going to be small. He took a breath. Looked away. And then he told me. Not in hints. Not in pieces. He just laid it all out. A deeply personal, unexpected fantasy, something he'd kept hidden for years. And let me be clear, it wasn't anything illegal or wrong, just different. Something I never imagined being part of our relationship. And that moment, that's when something shifted. In me. In him. In us. Because when you hear something like that, you don't just listen, you feel it. You replay every past moment in a new light. You question if you ever really knew the person lying next to you every night. And worst of all, you wonder what you're supposed to do with that truth now that it's out in the open. The days after his confession were nothing short of confusing. Do I support him? Do I shut it down? Do I explore it? Or do I walk away? Every choice felt like it came with a price. And slowly, bit by bit, the fantasy began to weave itself into our everyday life, not in obvious ways, but in subtle shifts, unspoken tensions, small choices that suddenly meant more. What was this fantasy? And what did I do about it? Well, that's where this story begins. Before we go deeper, I want to ask you, have you ever discovered something about your partner that made you question your entire relationship? Would you be open to exploring something that made you uncomfortable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll also leave a poll: would you stay and explore, or walk away and protect your comfort? This story isn't black and white. It's about love, vulnerability, and the messy parts of marriage that no one talks about out loud. So stay tuned, because what happened next, I never saw coming. I sat there, frozen, staring at the laptop screen long after the tabs had loaded. It wasn't just one article or some harmless curiosity, it was a whole trail. Bookmarked pages, saved forums, discussion threads, and even a few anonymous posts Kabir had written himself. And the more I read, the more it hit me. This wasn't just a passing thought or something he discovered recently. He had been living with this side of himself for years. Quietly. Secretly. The fantasy he told me about, let's just call it a shift in relationship roles, wasn't about replacing me or being unfaithful. It was about control, surrender, power, and trust. Things that are hard enough to talk about without the fear of being judged. But now that I had the full picture, I couldn't stop wondering why he'd kept it buried for so long. Did he think I'd never understand? Or was he afraid it would change how I saw him? And to be honest, it did change something. Not in a bad way, not yet. But it made me realize how much of our marriage had been built on what we thought the other person wanted, not what we actually needed. That weekend, we were supposed to go out with friends, but I made up an excuse. I needed space. I told Kabir I was tired, but the truth was, I needed time to think. Alone. I kept going back and forth in my head. One part of me was still the version of Nina who wanted the quiet, predictable life. The dinner plans, weekend getaways, slow mornings with tea on the balcony. But the other part, the curious part, was beginning to wonder if we were both just playing it safe. I started remembering moments from the past, things he'd said, looks he'd given, jokes he made that I'd brushed off. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, and I'd missed it. Later that night, I brought it up. Not directly. I just asked him, "How long have you felt like this?" He didn't lie. He looked down, rubbed the back of his neck, and said, "Since before I met you." I just never thought I'd have the courage to say it out loud. There it was again. That tension. Not just between us, but inside me. Because now that I knew, I had to decide, do I step into this unfamiliar space with him? Or do I protect what we already have by pretending we never had that conversation? And the plot only thickened from there. One night, while scrolling through my messages, I saw a name I didn't recognize. A DM from someone who clearly knew about Kabir's online activity. Someone who said they had a story to tell me. And that's when I realized this fantasy of his. It might be bigger than I thought. What would you do if someone from your partner's secret world reached out to you? Would you open the message, or leave it unread? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to guess, who do you think this mystery person is? Friend? Stranger? Or something more? The next chapter changes everything. I didn't open the message at first. It sat there in my inbox for almost 2 days, just staring at me every time I opened my phone. The name wasn't familiar. No photo. Just a few lines of text in the preview. "Hi Nina. I think you deserve to know the whole truth about Kabir. This isn't just a fantasy for him." My heart would race every time I saw it, but something inside me said, wait. Don't jump to conclusions. But then again, hadn't that already passed? By then, Kabir had started acting different too. Not in obvious ways, but it was like he could feel the walls closing in. He was more careful, more present, almost too present. Making dinner without being asked, laughing too hard at my jokes, touching my hand just a little longer than usual. I knew he was trying to hold on to something. The version of us before the truth came out. But that version didn't exist anymore. Finally, one evening after he'd gone out to pick up groceries, I opened the message. My hands were literally shaking. The person, who didn't share a real name, claimed they had interacted with Kabir online for months. They said Kabir had created a second profile, one with a completely different identity, and that they'd had deep emotional exchanges, exploring his hidden life in ways I never had. There were screenshots. Fragments of conversations. Some were vague, others personal, too personal. I sat there, reading them over and over, trying to breathe. It wasn't that he cheated. There was no mention of physical meetings or romantic attachment. But the emotional side of it, the secrecy, the detail, the investment, felt just as heavy. He had opened up to a stranger about parts of himself he never trusted me enough to share. Why? Was it fear? Or did he just never think I could handle that version of him? When Kabir walked back in, I didn't say anything. Not yet. I watched him move around the kitchen, humming to himself like everything was normal. And for the first time, I felt like I was watching a stranger. Or worse, like I was in a story where I didn't even know my own role anymore. Later that night, I asked him, "Is there anything else you haven't told me?" He paused, looked at me with that same unreadable expression, and said, "No. That's everything." And I just nodded. But it wasn't everything. Not anymore. I still haven't replied to the message. I don't know if I should. Part of me feels like I already have all the pieces. The other part wonders what I still don't know. And that's the part keeping me up at night. If you were me, would you confront him with the screenshots? Would you reply to the stranger? Or just walk away before it all explodes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and tell me, what do you think Kabir is still hiding? Because what's coming next isn't just about secrets. It's about choices. The next morning, everything felt a little too quiet. Kabir was already up, sitting on the balcony with a mug of tea, staring out into the sky like he hadn't slept either. I watched him from the hallway for a few seconds, wondering how long he'd been carrying all this weight, and how long I'd been blind to it. My phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting another work notification, but it wasn't. It was another message from the same anonymous account. He didn't just talk to me, Nina. He made promises. "If you want proof, meet me." My heart stopped. I didn't even have time to react before Kabir turned and saw me. "You okay?" he asked. His voice was soft. Too soft. Like he already knew something had shifted again. I told him I was fine. I told him I was just tired. But inside, I was spiraling. Who was this person? And more importantly, what did they mean by promises? All day, I couldn't focus. I kept rereading the message, questioning if it was real or someone just playing games. But something about the details in their earlier messages, it was too specific. Too intimate. This wasn't some random troll. I finally replied. Who are you? What do you want? The response came almost immediately. You need to hear it in person. He's not who you think he is. I don't want to ruin your life, Nina, but I think you already feel like it's falling apart. That night, I didn't say anything to Kabir. I couldn't. I needed to figure out if this was real before throwing another bomb into what was left of us. But the tension was unbearable. We sat in silence through dinner, both pretending to be okay while every second felt like a countdown. And then, just as I thought it couldn't get any worse, I found the notebook. I wasn't looking for it. It was tucked behind a stack of old magazines in the bottom drawer of our study. Just a plain, black journal. No name, no label. But when I opened it, I recognized his handwriting immediately. It wasn't just notes. It was full entries. Pages and pages of thoughts. Desire, that's all you get. Within minutes, the anonymous user replied with a location, a quiet cafe just outside the city. I told Kabir I was meeting an old friend from college. He didn't question it. Just kissed my forehead and said, "Drive safe." That hurt more than it should have. When I reached the cafe, I recognized her immediately. She wasn't what I expected, no drama, no wild expression. Just calm, composed. She stood and introduced herself as Maya. Her real name. At least, that's what she said. What she told me confirmed everything and turned everything upside down. She wasn't just someone Kabir had chatted with online. They had known each other before I came into the picture. Years ago, they had explored that same world of fantasy, boundaries, and control together. Not romantically, she said, but intensely. Emotionally. Kabir had pulled away when he met me, wanting something more normal, as she put it. But after our wedding, he reached out again. Not to restart anything, but because, in her words, he was struggling. He felt like a part of him was dying in silence. He wanted to be honest with me, but didn't know how. Maya wasn't there to expose him. She said she reached out because she saw what it was doing to him and to me. And maybe, in her own way, she wanted to protect both of us from watching everything fall apart. When I got home, I didn't wait. I placed the journal on the table, sat across from him, and said, "No more hiding." Kabir stared at the notebook for a long time before speaking. And when he did, it wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It was the most vulnerable I had ever seen him. He told me everything. Every version of the truth. About Maya. About the internal war he'd been fighting. About how much he loved me, but also how much he feared I'd never accept that other part of him. We talked until sunrise. And then, just when I thought the worst was over, he asked me something that left me speechless. "Nina, what if this side of me isn't just a fantasy? What if it's who I really am?" And that's when I realized, the real question wasn't whether I could accept him. It was whether I even knew who I was in this marriage anymore. What would you do in my place? Tell me in the comments. Because maybe the ending hasn't even started yet. I didn't answer Kabir right away. I just sat there, letting the silence fill the space between us. His question echoed louder than anything he'd confessed before, not because it was shocking, but because it was honest. Raw. And impossible to ignore. Over the next few weeks, we slowed everything down. No forced conversations. No pretending. We started talking like two people trying to meet each other again for the first time. And in a strange way, we did meet again, only this time, without the masks. I asked questions I never thought I'd be brave enough to ask. He shared fears he never dared to speak out loud. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried alone in the shower, mornings where I questioned if I had the strength to stay. But something surprising happened along the way. I started seeing Kabir not just as my husband, but as a human being who was still learning how to live with himself. just like I was. And I realized, love doesn't mean being perfect for someone, it means being real with someone, even when it's uncomfortable. As for Maya, I met her one last time. We talked like two women who shared more than just a connection to the same man, we shared the burden of understanding him. She wished me well and disappeared quietly from our lives, leaving no more messages, no drama, just closure. We decided to go to couples therapy. Not because we were broken, but because we both needed help navigating what came next. It wasn't about the fantasy anymore, it was about finding a space where both our truths could exist without shame. 6 months later, we're still together. And no, things aren't perfect. Some days, the past still lingers like fog on a cold morning. But we've learned to talk through it. To question everything without fear. We're not the same couple we were before all this, and maybe that's the point. Because in the end, my husband's secret didn't break us. It changed us. And somehow, that change helped us grow into something stronger than we were before. If you've ever found yourself wondering how well you really know your partner, or yourself, maybe this story will help you ask the questions you've been too afraid to say out loud. Tell me in the comments, what did you feel when it all unfolded? Would you have stayed? And if you'd like a sequel or want to hear Kabir's side of the story, let me know below. I'm listening.